So it's Sunday morning, October 1st. And yeah, I'd normally be off to be meeting other Christian people at church, but I have company coming from out of town and they will be here. Oh, let me silence the watch page. Sorry about that. They'll be coming from out of town and I need to be here. So I am skipping. And no, I won't be struck by lightning. As you can see here, I've got a little reminder of the seasonal model and the helio model. And right now we're just past the equinox, not very far, which, you know, the September one, so that's this one at the bottom. And you can see the Earth is still tilted the same no matter where it goes in their model, but as it's facing the sun, it's not tilting toward away. Here at the solstices, where northern hemisphere is tilting at June, the northern hemisphere tilts toward the sun. December, it's the southern hemisphere that tilts toward the sun just because of that in their model. And you can see from there's the opposite equinox in the spring. That this is kind of the way if we were on the other side looking at us right now, this is what we would see. We would only look at the angle that the sun or the Earth is tilted at the sun right now at the September equinox. Okay, so it's looking straight on, but it's kind of, angled to one side rather than forward or away. This raised a question in my head about what I'm going to show you on my own sun tracking. Because if you recall the camera tricks video, they're telling me that my camera is making the sun rotate. But if that's true, then the straight line motion across the sun of sunspots should never happen. It should always arc. And it doesn't. I'm going to show you that. But anyway, I wanted to get this, remind you guys of, before watching, of where we are supposedly right now. We're down here at the bottom where, the full face of the Earth is being lit right now, not at an angle to our axis of rotation that, as far as the terminator line goes. But we are tilted at this angle. So what does this mean? If our camera on Earth right now, looking at the sun on the other side of this ball here, is tilted kind of this way, then if this is the sun's axis of rotation, then we're turning it that way. Whatever way if you look at something on the wall and turn your head to the right, the thing you're looking at goes to the left, right? It goes, if you turn your head to the right, you're going clockwise, and the thing you're looking at appears to go the opposite way, counterclockwise, okay? Same thing, if you turn your head to the left, the object on the wall will appear to go clockwise because you're going counterclockwise. And I established that in the camera tricks video that my camera is moving clockwise, therefore the spots must, by the laws of physics, move counterclockwise, and they don't. They move clockwise. In the same way, if the Earth is tilted clockwise a little bit in this diagram to the right, then the sun's axis of rotation should be off to the left. That is to say, instead of, here's our line going this way, okay? Normally the sun's, it's close to ours. It's not completely straight up, but in their model, it's, in that vicinity. Well, if I'm turned this way from the sun, then, if my camera angle is messing with me, then the sun's axis of rotation should kind of be that way, okay? But when it comes to the sun's equator, it adds up because here's our equator. It's roughly, like I said, kind of the same axis of rotation. Is close enough. So the sun's equator should be going like this as well. It should be going straight across to us, but is it? We'll find out. Let me first of all remind also about the lensing issue. You can see this again. And the fact that we are looking through distortion. The least distortion is when the sun is overhead. As you can see, if you're on the equator on this side, the sun will be at least distorted all the time, except on one of the solstices or a little bit more distortion. But at any given location on the Earth, the least distortion is in this when you're looking straight up at the zenith of the sun's path. It's maximum altitude. And when you're looking at sunrise or sunset, you're looking through a lot more lens. And so what I found curious was that when you had the least distortion is when the sun appears to rotate fastest. And also, when we remember from some of the other diagrams, the sun is going like this as well, north, south, north in the northern hemisphere, that you would think as far as its apparent speed across the sky that it would slow down here because it's turning back to you. You know, when something is going a certain direction and then it turns to go back, it's going to appear to slow down in its angle of rise. And it does. It seems to go faster, you know, about, I think it was like, as far as the rotation goes, it's like 10 degrees and then it gets 4, 6, and then back to 10. But as far as its angle of rise, you can watch timeanddate.com as well, or look at your sundial and see that the rate of rise, I'm sorry, not the angle, but the rate of rise slows down when it gets to its point of turning back. So just stuff to remind, you know, things we've gone over before. And also we had this where when we're tilted at the solstice at 23.5 degrees, we're looking more down at the sun just slightly. But right now at the equinox, we're looking across, although tilted at that angle. And so we should be looking roughly at this equator, but which is the equator going to go straight across our field of view? Or, you know, you would think it would. But regardless of the theory, here's what I got. Now this is, here's a spot. There's, you know, call this the lowest spot, and then the middle spot, and then the top one. They started at the beginning of these black arrows, okay? That's where the spots were originally. And it was just the most ideal conditions that I wanted for near the equinox, where I could have a long string of sunny days and spots in a pattern that I could easily track. And that's what we had for the last 6 days. I've been tracking this. And on the first and last day, I did an hourly track, which is to say I'm taking my camera out every solar hour and taking a picture using the same settings on the camera every time. And I did, like I said, on the first and last day. These are 6 days apart. And so the first spot group, actually, there's usually a group of them, but the main spot I track, you know, went like this. And you can see, you can count the grids and how many circles away from the center. And the second one did something similar. And the third one that started way up here, of course, it's closer to the center. It's as if we're looking down at the sun's pole. But, you know, and I showed in my camera tricks video that that's not my camera doing that. Okay, so you would expect it to move slower as things are toward the center, and it seems to be the case. And that's one day. Well, then I checked it every morning at the same time and did that for 6 days, okay? And they went across like this. And this is how far the 3 dots went across. You can see which one they are by where they started. And they went across following roughly this line through the center, which is in all likelihood the sun's equator. Does that make sense from that other drawing I showed you? Let's see, I think it was this one. Okay, we're kind of at this angle to the sun right now. The sun's axis of rotation is roughly the same of ours, so the equator should be doing this. Well, if my camera were messing with us, which way would that equator line be? Okay, does this make sense? Back to this again. Okay, if our equator is this and the sun's equator is roughly the same, then if my camera is tilting, how and why is it tilting? Why is the sun's equator going almost 90 degrees to this line? You know, here's our equator. Here's our axis line. And I don't know why that message was set for review. I don't know why somebody's typing chalk. I might get rid of them if they do it again. Anyway, this is our axis of rotation. Here's the equator. Well, the sun's equator should be the same, but it isn't. It's more like our axis of rotation, which makes no sense. There's no way my camera can be doing that. Yet, that's what we got. But nevertheless, regardless of the fact that the angle is wrong of the movement across, and regardless of the fact that my camera cannot be causing clockwise rotation, the spots do move across the face, okay? Which is telling me if this is the equator and these spots are moving across it, because they would be if the equator is perpendicular to the axis of rotation. Axis of rotation is over here. Back to this. So this is what we're seeing, the axis of rotation of the sun, when it should be over here. And there's no way the rotation of the Earth can cause that. No way my camera is causing that. I don't care whether you have the camera horizontal to the ground or to the elliptical of the sun. You can't explain it with this current heliocentric model. But what we do know by observation that isn't up for interpretation is that throughout the day, the suns move like this, or the sunspots move like that. And from one day to the next, every 24 hours roughly, the whole group of spots moves across, which tells you that this thing is rotating on this axis, which, as I said, is like a mirror image of what it should be, just as the clock rotation is a mirror image of what it should be. And so these bluish purplish lines, depending on your monitor settings, I did the hourly check on the last day. So this was the first, take this dot, this group of spots here, it went like this on the first day, it went like that on the 6th day. So it's been moving to the center. If I tracked every hour, every day in between, it would be following roughly these concentric circle lines and getting shorter accordingly as it moves toward the center, which is what you would expect if you take any, you know, like you've seen those ice skaters thing where they have one person in the middle and a line of people on either side, and they go around and around. The people on the end are going really fast. The person in the middle is just turning on their axis. And so that's what we're seeing going on here. So we are looking at a pole of the sun. This is the equator, and this is the center, the axis of rotation, which I guess more this line, if I'm going to be accurate here. This line would be the axis of rotation. Makes no sense in the current model. And we could also see, like this morning, I just went out and looked. This spot I can't see anymore. It was fading, by the way. That was another question I had, is, you know, when and why do spots fade out? And it seems, you know, I don't know if there's any set lifespan of a sunspot. There probably is an average, but this top one was faint to begin with, and I could not see it this morning. I didn't have my best scope out, but, you know, because I just a carrying one, you know, a little one that I got out to do spot checking, spot checking. But I couldn't see it this morning, which is about what I would expect. Not only is it fading out, but it's also going toward the limb. And these spots are, you know, even a little bit farther that way. Who can say what direction that really is? But the direction of rotation, you know, apparently of the sun on this axis. And when, so the equator, so this thing is like, this should be the equator. This should be the rotational axis. So it's 90 degrees off. It's not even really a mirror image. It's like 90 degrees off. So that's just data collection. That's what sunspots do, at least near the equinox. And I wish I had been doing this kind of tracking at the solstice. I'm going to have to wait till next year because, like I've said before, I'm not going out on December 21st or thereabouts and trying to hope that I don't ruin my camera taking it in and out of the bitter cold and dealing with different levels of humidity and not to mention, you know, if there's snow, sometimes there isn't in December, but if there's snow, that would be, you know, it would be inconsistent at best. And we tend to have a lot more clouds in the winter anyway. So my next tracking is going to have to wait till next June. So I don't know what to think of this other than what I've said, is that we have a daily rotation, clock rotation, that's the exact, it should be anti or counterclockwise if my camera was introducing this, as I once again referred to my camera tricks video. And we have lateral motion along what appears to be the sun's equator, that bluish green line going through the center. That appears to be the sun's equator because these lines are running parallel to it. And yet, you know, and as they rotate on each day, they follow roughly these kind of concentric circles and do what you would expect if we're looking at a sun's pole, which should not be true. On the helio model, once again, back to this one, we never look at the sun's pole. We're always looking, you know, at no more than 23.5 degrees, and the sun's, as far as that research I've been able to do, the sun's axis of rotation is roughly the same as Earth, not exactly, but roughly in the neighborhood. It's at least in this quadrant, pointing that way, spinning this way, roughly the same as the Earth. It's just that in their model, you know, sometimes we're pointing toward the sun, depending on which hemisphere, and angled at the side. But here again, these angles and rotations are the opposite or off significantly from what they should be in the helio model. This is just not what I'm seeing. And here again with the distortion, let me go back to that one quickly, of if we have lensing between the sun and the Earth that makes the double concave lens shape and accounts for distortion angles of where, you know, the sun's elliptical over the Earth, that we're, as I said before, we have the least distortion at the middle of the day. The sun seemed to spin faster at the middle of the day, but we got distortion. Why the distortion seems to slow that down, I don't know. But in any case, my camera, as I said in the camera tricks video, is not causing the rotation. Neither can it possibly cause this kind of movement of the spots. They should be going this way, according to that model. So all I know is that I'm making observations consistently at my location with the same camera from the same spot in the ground, and the helio model does not account for it. Let me look at the chat real quick. Yeah, more here than I expected, but then, you know, I seem to get 5 to 10 people every time, no matter what day or what time of day or whether I announce it ahead of time, because people aren't getting notices anyhow, so I haven't been bothering. But yeah, they definitely rotate faster at solar noon. And I have noted, whether it's correlation or, you know, just a coincidence or what, but there's at the point of least distortion as when the sun is highest, of course, and that's when they move the fastest. And also the sun's speed or rate of ascent to its altitude slows down when it gets to its turning point at the middle of the day. You will find that, you know, and I verified this with timeanddate.com, it matches up, that it went about 10 degrees in latitude every hour until it got near the middle of the day. Then it slowed down to 6, then 4, then 4, then back to 6, and then back to 10 again. So there's definitely a difference between what the sun is doing in the middle of the day, what it does on its way up or down. And here again, as I mentioned yesterday, if all of this is due to Earth spin, then what we observe the sun doing, speeding up and slowing down, should amount to changes of acceleration or velocity of the Earth's spin. And we should feel that, because people will say, well, you don't feel the Earth spin because there's no change of acceleration. You're going at constant speed. It's just like if you would speed up or slow down in a car, you only feel the change of speed. You don't feel the resting speed, you so to speak, the constant speed. Well, if the sun is changing speed in its rate of ascent and its rate of rotation, and if this is being caused solely by Earth spin, then we are seeing the Earth have changes of acceleration, and we should feel those every day. So we don't. Therefore, once again, I think at the very least, the observations are confirming geocentrism rather than heliocentrism. And once again, with Earth shape, I don't have that particular graphic up right now, the one with the different Earth shapes. This lensing issue will work on any shape, any model, even the helio model. As long as you have this kind of lensing between the sun and the Earth's surface, whatever shape the surface is, at your location, you will have that kind of distortion that we observe with the sun's elliptical path, and could explain a lot of other things that are not explained without the lensing. And that if this on the left constitutes Earth's dome, then you have to also have an anti-dome around the sun and the other luminaries. So take that for what you will, but I'm just saying that these angles made sense because of this double concave. And this was confirmed also by experiments done by the Dr. Zach group, where they did, I forget what day it was, not very long ago, within the last week, where they show that double concave, or at least concave, explains the shadow results that Eratosthenes got. If that's even true, it doesn't matter. But you could use, without lensing, you would have the Earth as a ball shape, but with lensing, the Earth can be flat. I hope I didn't say convex. I meant to say concave. I sometimes say one when I mean the other, but here we got double convex. And I put a link in one of his video comments to my video that goes into that in more detail. And I was saying, do you think I'm on the right track? He said, yep. So we're saying that if there is a dome, which I believe there is, then there must also be an anti-dome to make this shape, because this is the only way you get diverging light on the other side. And diverging light is what we're experiencing here on the Earth's surface, regardless of its shape. So, yeah, the spiral of the spots is exactly what's being shown here, because, you know, like I was saying, every day it's doing this turn and getting closer to the center and following this, exactly what you would expect. And while it's doing that, it's also, you know, all the spots are doing that on their own circles. So this one, of course, that started out with a small inner rotation, as it got farther away, it went a lot faster and farther, because that's what you expect when you're looking at a pole and something spinning this way. And I don't think any of these motions are explained by the heliocentric model. So, yeah, it is concave. Concave being it like a cave. That's how I remember it. A cave goes in, it doesn't go out. So this is a double concave lens because it's thinner in the middle. And light bends when it has a change of density. It goes through a change of density. It bends toward the thickest part because that's slowing it down. So it has more to go through, and that's why this kind of double concave lens is a diverging lens. The light source is here. The light will splay out. That's diverging. So yeah, it is concave. So yeah, like I said, sometimes I just thinking of other things, and I use the wrong term, and I mix people up and don't even know it. So yeah, the spiral motion is undeniable. If you can, like I said, though, it's hard to get the right conditions. We were blessed with very ideal conditions where I live, and I was able to track this at the time of year I wanted to track it, because we would see the straightest movement of the spots across the face. Go back to that one. And by tracking where these spots are beginning each day, we're showing where the equator is. And of course, the equator is perpendicular to the axis of rotation, which once again is 90 degrees off from the heliocentric model. So none of that can be explained by camera motion. There is absolutely no way to blame the wrong angle of the sun's equator on my camera. Just no way. And I've been neglecting drinking my tea, and I don't like it cold. Anyway, so all I can say, like I said, is this: I'm in the northern hemisphere, somewhere close to the 40th latitude, 40, not 40th latitude, but 40 degrees latitude in the U.S. And it is the spring or the fall equinox. Older you get, the more, you know, that you get. So it's a human mind is like a filing cabinet. Okay. When you're born, you got one drawer with one folder in it and maybe a couple of pieces of paper. The older you get, the more pieces of paper you get in that folder, and then you add another folder and that gets full, and you add another one. Then you add another drawer and that gets full. And after a while, the papers start slipping through the folders and get behind the drawers, and you know, you can't shut the drawers anymore. And it makes it really hard to find the one thing you want. You know, the more things there are to sift through, and that's what I attribute to senior moments. It's like, I got so much stuff in here now that I can't find anything I want. Anyway, all that to say, heliocentrism makes no sense. It just doesn't. I mean, you can make enough of it work to fool most people, even educated people, because they're compartmentalized, they specialize. And because of that, there are no holistic scientists anymore to speak of. And that's by design, and that's why, you know, those of us who are supposedly undereducated can see these things, because we haven't been indoctrinated or segmented away, isolated from the other parts, and we can look at the whole picture. So there you go. If for late comers, I can't type and talk at the same time. Just a quick recap again, this picture we're looking at is showing my observations over the course of 6 days. The dark outer arrows are the motions of spots as I first saw them. And that's over the course of 1 day, the black lines with the arrows. I forgot to put arrowheads on the yellow lines, but the bluish purplish lines are where they wound up after 6 days. So this one, if you follow the yellow line, from the base of this one to that one. And then the second one went over here and the third one went over here. And on each given day, they followed the spiral pattern of these, you know, these not in a spiral, but you get the idea. They follow the spiral pattern in across. They're not converging from all sides to the center. They're going across as a group. And each day they're getting closer and closer to this center ring. And then, of course, this one that started at the center ring pretty much is going away from it and having a longer arc as it goes, which is to be expected. So looking at the chat again, documented the sunspots this week before, the week before the eclipse. Yeah, we had a nice hour hand line of spots then, which was I was very happy to see that. I tracked them only the day of the eclipse. And because we had clouds before, I couldn't track the sun. And so, of course, we had sun all morning for the eclipse. And then when it came time for the show to start, the clouds rolled in. So be that as it may, we did see the line of spots, and it did move like an hour hand. So I've never seen any deviation from that all summer long, since I started really watching the spots. And like I said, I want to do this same kind of 6-day exercise at the solstice if we are going to be blessed with that many days in a row of sunshine, which isn't as likely as the spring as it is in the fall. This is generally the clearest time of year. So, yep, the wheel in the sky keeps on turning. The sun does rotate, in my opinion. It also has an axis of rotation. By rotation as far as this clock motion, yes, it does that. It also has this spin, as if to say if you put the sun on a pole, the pole will be going here and spinning that way. If you spin, push the ball that way around that pole, spinning that way, because we know this by watching the spots go across that way. Therefore, the axis of rotation is 90 degrees from there. And as it's doing that every day, it's doing this clock motion. So, yep, as I said in another video that I didn't grab a screenshot from to do this. We have 4 motions of the sun. We have X, Y, and Z axes plus the clock rotation. So none of this can be explained by the helium model. I mean, I think putting all those past videos together pretty much lays it to rest that the sun must be moving over us because, as I said, in the more latecomers, if my camera were causing these motions, we must experience changes in acceleration of the Earth because it's speeding up and slowing down as the sun moves across the sky. Therefore, if it's because of the Earth spin and my camera angle is being affected by that, then why aren't we aware of the changes of acceleration and Earth spin? The fact is the Earth is spinning, in a way that, if according to their model, the Earth must be spinning in a very erratic way, and we should experience those changes in acceleration, and we don't. Therefore, the Earth is not spinning. That's the only rational conclusion I can reach, but we have to remember again that this observation that I've got up here is science. Interpreting it isn't. So, once again, latecomers, the dark arrow lines are where the sunspots began 6 days ago. Actually, this is the 7th day from then. I just didn't track it today. This is a 6-day span of sunspot motion. I tracked hourly, so every solar hour on the first and last days. The first day is the dark arrow. The last day is the bluish ones. And the yellow lines tracks each individual spot from one day to the next. So this is an hourly track. This is a hourly track here, but this yellow lines are the daily tracks, and they are moving all in the same direction. Therefore, this is the sun's equator. It's about 23.5 degrees tilt, but it's 90 degrees off. And like I said, I showed that in, I think it was this one. Whoops. Clicking on the wrong thing again. So sorry about that. I was moving my mouse around again and didn't have it on the right thing. I had it on the watch page instead of my drawing here. But I hope I described it enough you can see what I was talking about. But here again, if we're at this angle to the sun, and supposedly the sun, we're told by the helium model, has roughly the same axis of rotation. Therefore, the sun's equator should be here, and our angle of tilt should be roughly the same as the motion of spots should be going down like this. Okay, should be going down like this, but instead, as you saw in my drawing, they're going like this. That's 90 degrees off. That's what I mean. In other words, if the sun is rotating the same way as these little, I don't know if you can see these little arrows. Let me see if I can. No, that's probably big enough for the screen. So yeah, here's this rotation. We're going this way. The sun has roughly the same angle, but what I'm seeing is this angle from the northern hemisphere. It shouldn't matter what hemisphere you're in right now because it's the equinox. It's very close to it, at least. That's 90 degrees off. And therefore, back to here, if the sun's axis going like this, which is perpendicular to the equator, as ours is, this pole is our axis of rotation, this is our equator, same with the sun, they're 90 degrees off. Here's our equator of the sun, here's the axis of rotation. You just turn it from the others drawing the helium model anti/counterclockwise 90 degrees, you'll get what we actually observe. And so we know which is which. We know where the equator is because of tracking spots over the course of, every day for 6 days, I tracked the spots and they all moved in the same way. So, all right, thanks for the sharing. Yeah, this is just straight up observation. And if a whole bunch of people did this, people who can be relied upon not to be proving a certain model, we would have enough data to start making theories. You have to have observation first. You have to have your data points, and we don't have enough. But like I said, it's took some ideal conditions because we're subject to the cloud cover that to be able to observe sunspots at a certain time of year for a week was just a tremendous divine gift, and I was happy to have the equipment to use to make it very consistent, because like I said, with the P900, you set it on moon mode and you get the sun just as easily, very, you know, focused and in frame and just slightly larger than the actual moon. And looking at the chat, no, I do not have Facebook. I just quit it about a month ago. My little pathetic protest against Zuckerberg and the lot of them, and they're deciding what should appear on my wall and what news should be offered in suggested posts. I just had enough of it. But anyway, that's what I got. And yeah, it would be very interesting to see someone in Australia or South Africa or someplace like that to do the same kind of observation. Like I said, if you expect to get a good string of sunny days, and there are spots, I would track it hourly the first day and the last day, and track it daily, you know, same time each day, to see whether, you know, that does the same behavior throughout the year and in every spot on the Earth, you know, different diverging spots. So, yeah, it would be great if everybody did this kind of an observation. And like I said, I'm just using moon mode on the P900 with a filter, of course. And although the focus isn't as sharp as I'd like, it's good enough that, because I didn't want to add any variables. I didn't want to tweak it at all. All I did was crop it, because it doesn't fill the frame and doesn't focus to infinity, which should tell us something as well. For either the sun or the moon. And so all I did was crop it and made them all the same size and lined them up on center. And that's what I got. So once again, these are my own observations, no funny business with, you know, no special mounts or anything. I'm staying parallel to the ground, which once again, as I said on my camera tricks video, is not explaining the motion. This motion should be going counterclockwise if it's my camera. And my camera cannot, if my camera is rotating, causing this, am I pointing at the right thing? Yes, I think yeah. Causing the clockwise rotation, then it should also mess with this motion. They tell us in the helio model that things move across the face. That's what they always show us. They don't tell us that those are days apart, that sunspot motion. Maybe they do, I just haven't seen it. But because I'm getting the same motion, then that means my camera is not rotating. So they can't have it both ways. They can't have me seeing this straight line motion from one day to the next and the clock rotation from 1 hour to the next. They can't have it both ways. My camera cannot be causing one motion and not causing the other. That's just impossible. Okay, people, yeah, see, in the south, see counterclockwise motion. Yeah, which again makes sense as far as when we think of the much easier to observe moon if you're up at night, that people see it rotated from what the people in the north see, because if you, as people have done, tape a circle to the ceiling, stand at one end of the room and look at it, and then stand at the other end, you're going to see it rotated. So, but as far as the direction of rotation, that's interesting because it's all about where you are on the Earth, yet the motion of a clock, or whether it's clockwise or counterclockwise, is dependent on the sun's movement, not yours. If it was our movement, then both hemispheres would be the same, I would think. Wouldn't you agree? If this is all caused by camera motion, all caused by Earth spin, then I would think that sunspot motion should be the same in both hemispheres. Because if you look once again at this model, it's just a matter of how much daylight you got. And the arc path of the sun, not its clock rotation, because everyone on Earth is spinning at the same angle. Therefore, if we're all spinning at this angle, regardless of where you are on the face of this ball, then sun motion, if it's due to your camera, should be the same, I would think. I'd have to think about that some more. But you remember that little experiment I did with a racquetball and a flashlight, or not the racquetball, the bigger, that yellowish rubber ball that I put equator lines and some latitude lines on. I can't see how that would matter what hemisphere you'd be in as far as the motion of spots going across the sun's face. They should all go the same direction. And if they didn't, that would be very interesting, but I don't know. So at any rate, like I said, even just from my location, if my camera is making the clock motion, my camera should also be messing with this linear motion, and it's not. I can't see how both can be true at the same time. I don't know. That's just... I really would have spent more time thinking about this, but I have company coming in about an hour, so I thought, well, I better knock this out and just put it past people. So there you go. Since it is Sunday, I think I will lapse into Bible talk, and let me see if I can stop sharing that. So if you don't want to hear Bible talk, this is your big chance to get away. I don't really have anything specific up right now. I was just going to just some general thoughts about sun and sun. That only works in English. I can't believe how many people mistake the two. In Greek, as I've said before, the word for sun is helios. It's where we get heliocentric. And the word for sun, as in a child, is huios. And they're two different root words. And no relation at all. And so we'd also expect that even words like Helios and Jupiter, you know, Jove, which of course wouldn't be pronounced that way in Greek, but they would be just standard Greek words, just like God is a standard English word. All right, we'll see you, Karen. Thanks for coming. And people don't understand the linguistics, you know, like I said, with connecting dots. If you have a connecting dots picture, the person who made it knows what picture they wanted to wind up with, and so they would put dots at certain spaces and give you some kind of order, whether it's numbers or letters or, you know, solving some kind of puzzle within it to get the order of the dots. Doesn't matter. You have to follow that order, or you'll get the wrong picture, or you get a scribble or whatever. But that's what people do with words. They connect dots that were never meant to be connected and can't be shown to be connected, and etymologically, can't talk today. I haven't had enough of my tea, I guess. But etymology, of course, is a study of the history and transmission of words and their changes in meanings over the years and through languages. And people who aren't aware of that or dismiss it will wind up with a scribble. They'll think they found the truth that's been hidden from them. It's like they said the other day, you know, if you're wanting to bake a cake and you just go into your kitchen and grab, like, I don't know, window cleaner, degreaser for your oven, and maybe some flour or some sand or whatever you got, you know, laying around, and throw that in a bowl and try to bake it, then you're not going to get a cake. And then you're going to say, these evil chefs were hiding the truth from me. This is what they're really making. And this is the kind of logic that I see going on. A lot of people who are seeking truth, but not being terribly sure about how they expect to find it, because they have no basis of determining truth from error, which is why I did that one video on epistemology, how you know what you know. You have to have some kind of measuring stick of reality, and that is chosen by faith alone, by preference, by whim, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, you should see my kitchen. We keep all kinds of things there because it's a small house and things get put where they fit. So I'm just being silly anyway. I mean, I don't have degreaser in there. I do have window cleaner under the sink. We keep all our cleaning stuff down there. Yeah, we have a whole bunch of weird things in the kitchen sometimes, especially I think a few leftovers from when I used to homeschool, and I just didn't have any other place to put some of the stuff that we made. So some of it's still in there. We do have this storage room now that I'm in, and moved a lot of stuff out now, but still there are things in the kitchen that use for cleaning or, various other purposes. There's even this stuff called Goo Gone. You get labels off of things that you want to wash, like a glass or something. It has a stupid high adhesive on it, sticker that you cannot get off. So you have to spray it with this chemical and get it off. But yeah, as far as I know, we don't have any sand anymore. We used to have when the kids were littler, we had a sandbox outside the back door from the kitchen. So there would be sand in the kitchen. But the point is that, excuse me, if you want to make something, you have to follow a recipe. And if you ignore the recipe, you don't get the same results. You can't say the person who made the recipe was trying to hide the truth from you. And that's the point of the logic is that or the analogy is that this is the kind of logic people use, if you can call it logic, when they go conspiracy hunting, and they have no clue what to connect, how to analyze data, how to collect data, how to analyze it, what theory to deduce from it. No clue. They're just wandering around, picking up whatever and thinking that somebody was hiding the truth from them when these things weren't related in the first place. But anyway, yeah, he'll find out about weird things in the kitchen, won't he? You got a little one, you're going to have weird things in your kitchen. But anyhow, that was the point of the analogy, was that this is what I see people doing on a virtual level when they go conspiracy hunting. And connecting words like S-O-N and S-U-N in English, which had nothing to do with the Bible, nothing to do with any other language of any time in history. Etymology takes some time, and you have to understand how language changes and how language families are related, such as Indo-European language, which English is a part of. So that's all that was about. And as far as being Sunday, one more thing, and I'm going to have to go pretty soon, is that there is no designated day of worship. People get on and on about the real Sabbath, which, according to the Bible, is Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. And then they conclude that the Catholic Church changed it to Sunday. And all the Catholic Church did, quote unquote, which people are very loose on the details, but it wasn't even really Constantine who did that part. But they eventually decided that it was expedient for the Roman Empire to have the same buildings used for worship no matter what religion it was. And when they incorporated Christianity as an approved state religion, they would have the people of one religion on there on a Friday night, another on a Saturday night, and the Christians were there on Sunday, and they would just hang different name tags basically on the idols and call them saints and whatnot. And so they made Sunday the day when the Christians went to worship. Well, the thing is, as far as the Bible is concerned, first of all, there is no designated day of worship for Christians. There is only for Jews. They were supposed to honor the Sabbath day. And some even argue, I've seen among the Hebrew roots movement and so forth, that they argue whether it was every 7 days or something else. But the fact is that it began at twilight or sunset, sundown, whatever, and that's when a day began. But the Sabbath would, of course, be Friday night, roughly, if it was every 7 days. And you would think by New Testament usage, it has to be, because some of the Pharisees were bragging to Jesus and his disciples that they fasted twice a Sabbath, which means twice a 7, and twice a week. If it's twice something else, that hardly means much. But so it seems that Sabbath, there was a weekly Sabbath, and it began on Friday night. Has nothing to do with the church at all. And I've gone over and over that. I wrote a book about it, that You Are All One, Debunking Hierarchy in Christianity. It goes all over the whole church issue. And I did a series of videos on that. You can also just listen if you wanted. So the thing is that there is no designated day of worship. There is no designated method of worship. The simplest, one of the earliest, I think, New Testament letter written was James. And he was a very practical person. There was no developed theology at that time for the Christian church. It was all very Jewish at that point. And he wrote even to the 12 scattered tribes. There are no 10 lost tribes. He wrote to all 12 of them, and they were all scattered, even though they were also all represented in Judea at the time. But that's another topic I've been over. The point is that he said, excuse me, that, well, now I've totally lost my train of thought because I had to clear my throat again. What was I getting on about James? Earliest book, and, oh boy. Oh well, I lost it. Oh, worship. He said that true worship is to look after orphans and widows in their distress and to keep yourself from being polluted by your contacts with the world. That's all it was defined as. And then the next biggest council, if you can call it, the so-called Council of Jerusalem in Acts 15, they sat down and said, look, do the Gentiles have to obey Jewish customs before they can be Christians? And the verdict was no. Even by the same James and Peter and John, the big three, the pillars of the church, so-called at that time, as Paul referred to them later, they were the inner circle of Jesus' 12. And so they were seen as kind of authorities. So what they concluded is that no, Gentiles who become Christians do not have to follow Jewish customs. They just have to be considerate of Jewish culture and not, needlessly irritate the Jewish culture around them. And so that was the verdict of the council. And so here again, there are no instructions on a day, time, place, or official overseeing worship of God among Christians. There is no day of worship for us, for the church. Paul later on said, pray without ceasing. He even, when it came to baptism, there's two so-called ordinances, baptism and the Eucharist, so-called. Protestant churches generally don't call it that. We call it the Last Supper or the Lord's Supper. Neither of those have instructions for how to conduct them, when to conduct them, where, or who conducts them. There is no official ever mentioned in any church gathering, except that certain people like the apostles who had been taught by Jesus directly, and that included Paul later on. And he was accepted by Peter, James, and John. So anybody who wants to say Paul was a false apostle has to deal with Peter, James, and John. Anyway, the point being that Paul is also a valid speaker of what is and isn't true of the church. And he said about baptism, he was happy he had not baptized many people. He also said, I did not come to baptize. God did not send me to baptize, but to preach the gospel to the Gentiles. Those are strange statements if baptism is an act of obedience. So here again, also even John the Baptist said before the cross and everything, before there was a church, he said, I baptize you with water, but one is coming after me who will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and fire. And so water was to be replaced by the baptism of the Holy Spirit, which is what everybody gets when they're saved, whether they feel anything or not. That's beside the point. I think the Pentecostal movement in general gets that kind of wrong when they say that you must speak in tongues or something like that when you're saved. That's not true at all. I don't believe that. But the point is that there are no ordinances because there are no instructions. Paul never said this is how, when you baptize somebody, this is where you do it, this is who can do it. And in those days, nobody, people basically baptized themselves. They dunked themselves in the water while somebody else was there to witness it. And when it came to the Last Supper, it was a meal before the Passover. That's clearly demonstrated. I have that in my commentary and so forth. It was the preparation for the Passover, and the meal they ate, there were no sacrificial lambs or anything that was to be done by the high priest, and the disciples were not high priests. So they had a meal before on the eve of the Passover, the preparation day. And in that meal, at one point, this is also where Jesus washed his disciples' feet. I've gone over that before, but he also passed the bread. He broke the bread and passed it to them and said, this is my body broken for you. Do this to remember me. And that's all he said. It says, as often as you do this, remember me. And the same with the cup, which he said, this is my blood of the new covenant. And that has all sorts of bearing on other arguments I won't get into right now. But he's basically signing a new covenant in his own blood and saying, this is what this cup represents. Do this to remember me, not to re-sacrifice me. It is not a literal sacrifice. He was clearly in that context not talking about the fact that he hadn't even been sacrificed yet the first time. You know, how could they be eating his literal body and drinking his literal blood if he hadn't even gone to the cross yet? So this is where a lot of people, I think, miss the mark. But the point is that it was a remembrance, not a salvation issue, just something to do to remember him. And when Paul chided the Corinthians, 1 Corinthians, later on, he's saying, you guys are doing this chaotically and you're having this meal, but people are gorging themselves while others go starving. And he's like, don't do that. You're missing the point. You're not remembering Jesus when you do this. And they were just sharing a meal. And that's all they were doing. And while Paul was saying everything should be done decently and in order, so that because God is not the God of disorder, but of peace. And I've had people take that right out, rip it out of context and beat me over the head with it to try to shut me up on a certain theological disagreement. That is twisting scripture, not quoting scripture. And people who do that should be ashamed of themselves. However, in that context, Jesus is saying, or Paul is saying to the Corinthian church, that you're being chaotic about this. You're not remembering Jesus. You're not remembering the poor and starving. You should be ashamed of yourselves. This is how you do it. Do things in order. If you're hungry, eat at home first so you don't gobble all the food if the church brings together. If you're thirsty, get a drink first. Remember the poor. Remember Jesus when you do this. And there's no mention of an official, no mention of a particular place, no mention of how often, what time, what day. No penalty for not doing it. Same with baptism. There's no penalty for not baptizing someone. There's no penalty for not being baptized, and no one is ever said to be excluded from fellowship on the basis of not having been baptized. So if those two things were ordinances, which is to say binding acts of obedience, their lack of instruction and punishment for failing to do so is conspicuously absent in the scriptures. So the church is free to be grateful for what the tremendous gift we received by faith. We couldn't work for it. And because of that, we should be grateful. We should be kind because God has been kind to us. We should be free from religious trappings. And the early church was. They just met together in homes because they were acting like family. They're supposed to be. And as the historian Philip Schaff, that I quoted many times before, said, it didn't take long for people that just could not sustain faith without religion, just as the nation of Israel could not sustain a nation without a king. And God said, don't want a king, you don't want one. All right, I'll give you one, but you're not going to like it. Of course, they didn't. They were just, wanted to be like the rest of the world. And so it was religion, whether Jewish or non-Jewish religions. People couldn't get away from the need to feel religious by having a priesthood, a sacred place, sacred furniture, sacred objects, sacred liturgy. They just couldn't leave it for long. And this is just what Paul and the other apostles predicted. As soon as we depart, ravenous wolves will arise from among you and scatter the flock. And that's exactly what happened. The Christian church has been sidetracked from within a generation of the apostles. And that's why there's so much wrong with it today. There is a lot that it does good and does well, and God will work through that. But it isn't what he wanted. I can tell you that. So let me look at the chat again. Yeah, the money is supposed to be, as Paul said once again, not so that other people can be relieved while you suffer, but so there is equality among Christians. We're supposed to take care of each other, first of all. You take care of your family first. The Bible even says that. Don't burden the church with someone who, like a widow, if she has relatives who can take care of her. They should do that first. That's where we get the phrase charity begins at home. And so it is with the church. We have to take care of each other first, and we have to totally drop the ball. And part of the problem is the government interfering, taking our money at gunpoint so that we don't have anything left to help each other. And so they take over the charity business, and they do it horribly wrong. But even in spite of that, churches still manage to do some charitable work, and you have to take care of your own people. That's the purpose of giving, is to take care of people. Not to give to a clergy class that doesn't even exist in the New Testament, and not to take care of buildings, which the church isn't supposed to buy. I'm not saying it's a sin to do those things, but I am saying it's not ideal, and how can we justify the money we spend on it? That's the problem. Yeah, that phrase about it being sounds American. I'm going to botch this up, but there was somebody had a phrase that then when it came to the gospel, when the Romans got it, they turned it into a government. When the Greeks got it, they turned it into a philosophy. When the Europeans got it, they turned it into, I forget what. I'm missing one. And when the Americans got it, they turned it into a business. Culture imposes itself on the gospel and turns it into something it's not. And I don't know how many times I've heard people on and offline, preachers especially, try to liken the church to a business or marriage to a business. What? I mean, where do people get this idea that marriage, Christian marriage, or a Christian congregation is anything like a business? I don't care how businesses are run. I don't care how armies operate. We are not armies or businesses. We are the church, the body of Christ, and a Christian marriage is not either of those things either. We are not an army. We're not a business. And people who try to run it that way and try to think there must be a hierarchy, and there are people who believe there's hierarchy in heaven among human beings. Certainly there's a hierarchy between God and people, and there's a difference in rank between people and angels. But among people, there is no rank, not in the body of Christ. And that's, again, what that book is about that I wrote. But I am going to have to go here and let me check the chat. Yeah. Yeah, somebody tried to estimate what a typical, at least in years past, housewife did, the work that they did, and raising children and keeping the house and all those sort of things, that would be worth a good chunk of money if they were paid. But this is slave labor. But not if if it's a family and everybody's volunteering their services. That's the way it should be. People do what they can to help each other, and the family is happy and taken care of as a result. Everybody doing what they're best at, not what their flesh is supposedly put them into a pink or blue box says they must do, and it comes with these lists of activities. And that's just not how it works. I mean, my husband and I just celebrated 28 years together, and it's been an egalitarian marriage. He does what he does best. I do what I do best. And they cross over the pink and blue box lines, and we don't care. We threw those boxes away when it comes to who does what in the family. Both of us can cook, both of us can fix computers, both of us can, build things to some extent. He's much better at building and fixing than I am, and I'm better at handling finance and legal issues that concern the family. We're all better at different things, and so we defer to the person who has the best skill set. That's the way it works. We cooperate, we get along well, we have a good complementary set of skills. It works for us. It's been working for nearly 30 years. So let's look at the chat again. Let's see. Rockefeller funded women's movement to split apart family. Yeah, well, no doubt about that. But here again, the solution is not to put women back in the house and forbid them to work. Every family is going to be different. Every couple should decide what works best for them. Every family what works best for them. It isn't for society or anyone else to impose their collective will on a couple. I know people, for example, where the woman has a PhD in physical therapy. Is she supposed to stay home with the babies while the man works at a menial job? Not saying that particular man does, but they're both educated. But I mean, what a waste if she can't use her PhD in physical therapy. She's going to have to leave the house to do that. And she will have the money to pay someone to maybe clean up the house once in a while, or whatever it is, childcare, and maybe the husband will stay home with the children. It works for them. It works for them. And nobody can tell them that it shouldn't be that way. As far as paying strangers, I totally agree. They should be raised at least. I mean, some people don't have the option. For whatever the reason, some people don't have the option. And we cannot turn our backs on them and be cold and turn a blind eye on their suffering. Just like if we make women dependent and something happens to the man, then society picks up the tab because the woman has no skills to support herself and she is underpaid if she tries. This is why there should be equal pay for equal work. that is a valid grievance, because somebody should not assume that because she has the potential of getting pregnant that she should be paid less. That's asinine. She should be paid more, if anything, because she's going to be in an economic disadvantage. And that's why people should all do what works best for them, and why women should be paid at least the same as a man for doing the same work. She needs to be able to support herself. A lot of, that's just reality. Even in the best of times, something can happen to the man, or he just leaves. Men do that sometimes. And what is she supposed to do? She has to have a skill set, and it has to pay well for her to take care of her family. And she might have to have somebody else watch the kids. Now, I agree, some people are doing that out of sheer laziness. Our church happened to, people were asking, why don't we do summer vacation Bible school anymore? And they said, well, what people were doing in the community is going from one Bible school to the next all summer long, using it as a free babysitting service. Parents would just drop off their kids and take off and take advantage of the church's kindness and go from one church to the next. They would each have different weeks that they would have their summer, they call it vacation Bible school, because the kids weren't in school and the parents couldn't either. I understand if there are some parents who can't afford sitters and they need to work, then there should be churches, if they weren't being, if people who have jobs that support the churches weren't being taxed to death, they could set up daycare centers that were run by reliable, godly people. But, the world is messed up. It's just the way it is. So we have to take each case individually to see what works best for a family. And here again, society cannot impose a hard and fast, cold-blooded rule on everybody. One size does not fit all. We just have to be sensible and kind about it. So yeah, a mother's job, it's like the old saying goes, a man's work is from sun to sun, and a woman's work is never done. Child rearing is the hardest, most responsible job, because you are setting the course for a human being's life. You teach them how to eat, go to the bathroom, dress themselves, walk, talk. Those are pretty important skills to have. And parents teach their children that. And so even if it's, both parents should have a hand in that. But it is better if one or both of the parents can do that, and sometimes it's just not possible. Or it should be made possible by people getting together and supporting them, at least giving them some basic necessities so that somebody can stay home with the kids. So yeah, teach them. We live on a spinning ball. Yeah, I did homeschool my kids in the early grades. I wanted to get them established in how you think, how you find truth from false, and analyzing objectively other ideas and seeing which one makes the most sense. I never had to spank my kids because I reasoned with them. If I had a rule at home, I said, this is why I have this rule, because, think of how you would feel if such and such, somebody left a mess for you to clean up, for example, or somebody took your toys or whatever it was. And even before they could talk, I was teaching my kids empathy. That's a really important social skill. And they can understand that. What I would do is, when they're old enough to sit up and play, I would have, they would have their toys, and I would have a few of their toys just kind of monkeying with them. And they would reach over inevitably and take one, and I would look sad. And I kind of watched them out of the corner of my eye, and they'd stare at me like, I don't want mommy to be unhappy. And they would give the toy back. And I would play with it for a minute. And I'd be all happy, and I'd give them hugs, and I'd play with the toy. I didn't give it back right away. Eventually, though, I'd hand it to them and smile and hug them and say, now you can have the toy because I gave it to you. And that's how you teach empathy before they can even talk. They understand emotions. And that's a really important skill, and it takes 24/7, So, yes, I agree. Ideally, to have one of the parents doing that, or both of the parents doing that, but life gets in the way, and you have to deal with it the best, most kindest way you can. So, yeah, when it comes to nannies or whatnot, like I said, if it's necessary, pick a good one if you can afford one. And the state is the worst place to go for child care. They know nothing about, they've been trying to do that through the school system, and they churn out the results you see today in the world. Mindless robots, narcissists, whatnot. Hey, everybody. Boy, I shouldn't use that phrase. I don't know, that brings back bad memories. But as usual, Chow, you show up when I'm just about to quit, and I have to because I have company coming. And I said that about 20 minutes ago. But first part of the video, as always, was about, well, not as always, but as usual has been my habit lately, has been about science and sunspot movements and so forth. Second part, since it's Sunday, I kind of rolled right into that, a little bit of sun versus sun, S-U-N-S-O-N, and then day of worship, church rituals, and how they're completely absent from the New Testament, and then into general child rearing and the home, because I talked about how it is between a husband and wife is not a business or an army. And because of that, each case is different. Each couple decides how to run their family, what works best for them. And, oh, okay, you've been listening, you've been lurking. Not that I never do that, but teach your niece to count by eating her snacks and counting them out. That's actually a good way to teach liberalism. Okay, I'm the government and I'm here to help. You have 2 cookies. I'm going to take 1.5, and you should be happy you got a half left. And oh, that kid over there doesn't have any cookie. You're a racist. I'm taking your other half cookie. That's how you teach them how to be a liberal. But anyway, I do have to go, and I'll catch y'all later. Thanks for coming.